You are about to enter the Shockwave Skullsessions podcast. Coming soon to shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
I want to do some more on the 70s because all the podcasts, even, the popular ones, Eddie Trunk and all this stuff, it all concentrates on the 80s, when they got into metal. And very few shows talk about the development of, the hard rock metal scene from the 70s. And,
yeah.
We're old enough that we grew up during that era. I know my two guests today, Patrick Scott. What's up, Patrick?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing good. Of course, Patrick, we had him on a previous episode. I said, we got to get him on this one as well. And I got a second guest, Mike Murray, my first metal buddy that I used to go record store shopping with back in the grade school days. What's up?
Hey, what's up, Bob? How you doing, man?
How you doing, man? And of course, we got our co-producer here, Matt Hartnett.
What's going on, guys?
How you doing?
Hey, Matt.
So anyway, I think it would be fun to talk about, the days before the 80s metal scene and the new wave of British heavy metal and kind of what led up to that. Both Pat and Mike deep into going to record stores, which was the big thing. I mean, we used to drive. I think Mike and I, before I met you, Pat, we drove up to Oz Records a couple times, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the one that was in Woodland Hills?
Exactly. Brian Slater.
Yeah, I lived near there. Yeah, we used to buy all our merchandise and buttons for our denim jackets.
Exactly. And then, of course, we went to the record swap meets and a music market, our favorite place in Costa Mesa, where we bought tons of used records. And they were like, Patrick, do you remember Music Box in Huntington Beach?
I do.
There was one right around the corner from where I lived in that Gemco shopping center. And there was another one like in Fountain Valley across from Miles Square. And they had a lot of great used records.
Yeah, they did. I remember the guy that worked there, too. I remember him really well.
Dude, he used to be in a Humble Pie tribute band, he said.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, that's where I got my first Who record.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
You guys remember a store there was one in Huntington, and then there was another one in Belmont Shores, but it was called Hezekiah McCain's.
Yeah, I do remember the Belmont Shores one, right on like Ocean Boulevard.
And that was Jeremiah McCain. That was his brother.
Okay.
So there was Jeremiah McCain's and Hezekiah McCain's, and it was in the strip mall on Golden West and Warner, like where Alpha Beta was, and later Huntington Music was there. Two Brothers Pizza and Drugorama.
Oh, dude, I totally remember that place. In fact, that was where, and then there was that head shop, Things for Your Head, right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I bought that Black Sabbath iron-on patch. Remember that, Mike? I had that old rainbow shirt. You remember Rock Tops?
That was way too tight on you?
Yeah, it was way too tight on me. Because you'd order from Rock Tops. It was classified in Circus magazine. And the shirts would always be way too small. You put them in the wash and then they'd be, but they were like, what were they, like $3.99 back then or something?
Yeah, it was more for postage than the shirt itself.
And I ended up buying a Black Sabbath. You remember those iron-on patches where you'd get your mom to like iron them on the back? And it was from Sabotage. It was from that era, but it was a totally different photo. It had like Tony Iommi with short hair and no mustache. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I was so fucking cool wearing a rainbow T-shirt with a Black Sabbath patch on the back.
You remember the elf shirt that I got, Bob?
What's that, Mike?
You remember that elf shirt that I had made from the album cover?
You got to hear this story. Mike and I, we always fucking competed. I mean, just like everyone else, back in the day, you always had to get the cool first records. Like I remember when the Maiden record first came out, you found that at Music Market, and I got so pissed. It's like, motherfucker. Because they would only have like one copy, usually.
It's competitive, huh?
Yeah.
Competitive.
Oh, totally. You remember, I think you went with me, Pat, to the Hollywood Record Swap Meet. That was when we first met Slagle and John Cornarians. Yeah. I think it was me.
I remember that, yeah.
And I think we talked about on this last podcast, Wendy Dio, who we didn't know who she was then. We just thought it was just some British chick, had a booth.
Yeah.
She sold all this old Blackmore stuff. And Mike and I were the biggest Blackmore fanatics around. And we always competed for the shit. So I find there that she had that 1976 Rainbow Tour shirt with Long Live Rock and Roll design on the front and Rainbow Rising on the back. Remember that, Mike?
Oh, yeah.
And so
Best of both worlds.
Of course. And the next day I'd go to school, wear it to school, and I'm boasting, check this shirt out. And I could see how Mike's like bummed, like, well, motherfucker. So you know what this fucking guy does? The next day he goes out and makes his own elf T-shirt. He's like, I'm going to have something Bob or nobody fucking has. And he made it of the design of the back of the first Elf album when Ronnie James Dio was dressed up like that
like
little elf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, take that, Bob. No one knew who Elf was.
You probably had the only Elf T-shirt on
the planet. Wonder what happened. There was this place where you could take your records to, and they would do a transfer onto any shirt. But it was super. I mean, it was expensive for being a 10-year-old kid or 11-year-old kid or however it was. But I was so proud. I think that wore that thing every day, and then it just eventually just washed out.
And we're talking because you were still at Parkview, right? Because you were a couple years younger than me, so we're talking like 78 probably, huh?
Yeah.
Because I remember you made a Whitesnake shirt too.
Oh yeah.
And
once I had the key, I was
there's no competition. All right, I kind of gave it to Mike.
Yeah, that's when Whitesnake was more bluesy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I dug him the most then.
So it was cool back then, but 10 years later, forget it, huh?
I know.
Moody and Bernie Marsden.
They were huge in Europe at that time, but nobody knew who they were here.
Well, Mike, you saw them open for Jethro Tull, right? What year was that? Was that like 79?
No, it wasn't Whitesnake. It was what? Maybe it was.
Yeah, it was Whitesnake. Because I remember it. Because I was kind of pissed. Because you came back after, like, dude, Whitesnake was so awesome. It was the A tour, I think, of Jethro Tull. So that might have been.
Yeah, it was a set. Yeah, it was because the first time I saw Jethro Tull, that band UK opened up.
Oh yeah, they were great. Alan Holdsworth.
Oh yeah, that was Holdsworth, wasn't it?
Yeah, Eddie Johnson and Bill Bruford.
Oh yeah, I didn't even know what I was seeing back then. I was like, that was my first show. 11. My dad got the third row center for Jethro Tull at Long Beach Arena. Man, it was just like heaven.
Oh, did you go with your dad or did you go with Andy, your brother?
Oh no, I went with Peter, and my dad got the tickets.
So how was Whitesnake?
Man, it's funny. I just remember that being cool, but I don't really remember now. It's just kind of remembered UK, and I obviously remembered Tull. But the second time I saw Tull, I think was when I saw Whitesnake. But it wasn't near as. I guess I was disappointed because once you get third row center, you just feel like anything else is just not so good. But yeah, no, they were really good. I mean, I liked them because they had more of that British blues sound as opposed to that kind of hair metal sound that I was never really a big fan of.
Right, and that was probably Ready and Willing tour.
Maybe, yeah, been a while. Yeah, that one was. Some more other shows stick out a little bit more from the metal years, like when we saw Metallica with Saxon, and I think that was 79, 79, 78.
No, that was 81.
Was it?
Yeah, 81.
Yeah, 81
Yeah.
or 82?
That
That would have been 82 because Metallica's first show was March of 82. So that was like, because you were already in high school then, I think, Mike.
Was I? Oh, it's all blurring together.
Yeah, that's right. You were at that show too. It's funny.
Yeah.
We're all three of us were at that show, and you guys. I always figured you guys kind of knew each other, but I guess you never met.
I'm sure we met if we saw each other. I mean, were you in a band too?
Yeah,
was I in a band?
With Larry Swall, right?
No, I wasn't actually. He played guitar, but I wasn't in a band until with like Steve Hallis when we started jamming, and then turning into DEF CON in the late '80s or '87ish, I think it was.
With Lloyd Grant.
Yeah, right. But I knew Larry Swall, and because we went to Ocean View together, and he was kind of the guy that him and a couple other guys that, I'd show up to school wearing an Angelwood shirt, and he'd freak out, or a Satan shirt, and and we'd freak out on T-shirts, kind of like you guys did.
Well, that was where I first met you. We went to a rehearsal with Larry Swall because I knew Steve Hallis and Alan Dominguez because we all went to Marina. And we were like freshmen then. So, this might have been like 80 or so.
Yeah, probably was. And I think they were in a band. I think they had a band, Alan and Steve and Larry. And I don't remember if they had a bass player or not. I can't remember.
Some guy named Manny was...
Manny Abascal, yeah.
I remember you had that Angelwood shirt, and you were one of the first to have a Jaguar shirt, and you had the Rock Until You Drop. And then you had the Satan shirt, and you'd be, I remember you'd be kind of a bum because you would go, yeah, man, I would go to school, and everyone would think, oh, you worship Satan? They didn't even know it was bad.
Yeah. I have two of those shirts. I still have them both, too, but they're so small. I can't imagine a human being wearing them.
And that was like pre Brian Ross, right? That was before Court in the Act.
Yeah, that was when the demo came out and the single.
Well, speaking of T-shirts, man, I got to tell this story. This is one of the reasons I want to get you on this podcast. When we used to compete for T-shirts before you started making your own designs, Mike, we would buy the shirts from Rock Tops. You remember Rock Tops, right, Patrick?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in the back of Circus Magazine, you would order the shirt.
They'd send a catalog out.
Exactly. And Mike, you ordered a Deep Purple shirt, and the shirt showed up, and it was a shirt with Tommy Bolin. Remember that?
Yeah.
And you were all pissed off. And because, we were huge Blackmore fans. Of course, later, I mean, even back then, I still love Come Taste the Band. I think it's one of their best. I think it's right up there with Burn. But back then, you were kind of like, Bob, here, you can have this shirt. And I'm like, fuck it, I'll take it. It's a Deep Purple shirt, So this was probably like, when was it? Probably 79 or so you got it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking Deep Purple. No one wore Deep Purple shirts back then. So I wear the shirt and it gets too small and whatever, and I just throw it, and with all my other shirts, I totally forget about it. Fast forward now to like 1996, okay? This story's going to freak you out. I'm driving down Sunset Boulevard, I believe with my buddy Bill Keene, and we're driving down by Sunset and Gower, and we see this homeless guy wearing a Deep Purple shirt. And back then, even in the 90s, nobody wore Deep Purple shirts. You see Zeppelin or Sabbath maybe, but no one, knew Deep Purple. My buddy's like, dude, that guy's got a Deep Purple shirt. And we're like talking, thinking, wow, man, I wonder, if this guy saw Deep Purple back in the day or whatever. And he was just like completely homeless, like, just kind of all drugged out. And we're like, oh man, that poor guy, maybe like took one too many hits of acid back in the day. And kind of thinking, I'm going, fuck, man, that shirt looks familiar, man. I think I had that shirt. And I said, fuck, that was a shirt with Tommy Bolin on it. And I said, my buddy Mike gave me that shirt years ago. What did I end up doing with that shirt? And I'm thinking, and in 92, 93, when I was living in Hollywood, I worked with my buddy. He had an office, Tommy Kita, at Raw Falcon Records. It was at the crossroads of the world. I don't know if you remember those offices. If you watch Ford Fairlane, that's where he had his office, Andrew Dice Clay, the crossroads of the world. And right next to there was a church. And there were all homeless people that used to sleep on the steps of the church at night. So I had all my old clothes and stuff, rather than giving them a Salvation Army or whatever, trendy people would buy them or whatever. I said, I'll go right to the source. I'll give it right to the. So I would drop off a big box of T-shirts right on the steps there. And this was like 93. And I'm thinking to myself, holy shit. 3 years later, 96, when I'm driving with my buddy, I go, that's my fucking Deep Purple shirt. That's Mike Murray's Deep Purple shirt from 1979 that this fucking guy is wearing.
Could it possibly be?
I don't know. I mean, what other,
I can't imagine. I don't think that shirt existed. They probably pressed maybe no more than 50 of them.
Yeah, I was blowing my mind, like going, dude, that's got to be the same fucking shirt. Because, again, how many shirts were there with Tom? And it was super small and all torn up on them, so it looked like it was like just beat to shit.
Did your mom write your name in the tag in the back? You should have gone.
No, and I was kind of pissed. It was like, fuck, man, I want to get that shirt back. That was a fucking cool shirt. So your Deep Purple shirt definitely got some good use out of it.
Yeah, it had legs, man, from Orange County to the mean streets of LA, right?
So, too bad we can't get that guy on the show.
Yeah, exactly. I did get to see Queen, I think, in 1979. And I didn't want to go. I'm like, fuck Queen. They're fucking, we will rock you. Fuck that shit. And they were so amazing. They were just amazing.
It's one of those bands I never saw that I wish I could have seen.
I never saw them either. And I remember when they came around those years, because the first show I saw was 79. So you were going a little bit younger, when you were younger. The first show I saw was AC/DC at the Long Beach Arena. And you were at that show, right, Patrick?
I was, yeah. We had 6-row seats for that. Yeah, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, well, we were just talking about that on the last podcast. And then, of course, Mike and I, we went, I think we went separate, but I know you were at the Rainbow Show, the Down to Earth show with Graham Bonnet. And
yeah, regretfully.
Randy Hansen. And you know who opened that show?
John Cougar.
John Cougar.
Yeah. Oh. And you said Rainbow wasn't good?
No, they were. Well, I was just so disappointed after Dio left. It was I never got to see him with Dio, so Graham Bonnet was kind of, he was kind of a pinup boy, and I just was not into it. But I was, happy to see Blackmore, but they just weren't the same.
I mean, it was a great show, but it wasn't Dio. And then we saw them, about a year after with Joe Lynn Turner, and that was at the Forum, I think.
Did we see him with Joe Lynn Turner?
Yeah. What was that? The Difficult to Cure tour? Yeah, at the Forum.
Yeah. Because I, when I listen to Graham Bonnet, I like him better than I like Joe Lynn Turner.
Mike, who opened up for Queen? Do you remember who opened up for Queen that show?
Oh, we got in there late when right in between intermission, so I don't remember who opened up.
Where was the Queen show?
Forum.
Oh, it was. Wow. And
we were way up in the nosebleeds, and it still just was insane. I love it when you go to see a show and you're kind of like, I don't know, and then they just turn you around and you're like, oh my God. Because that's when they were getting really big. I think it was before they did Fat Bottom Girls. I think that was 80, 81 or whatever. No, yeah, this was after News of the World, but
Rocky was on News of the World.
Right.
Oh, so it might have been the Game then, huh?
Yeah, I think it was. I should look that up to see who opened for him.
What about you, Patrick? What were some of your old shows that you remember, or some of the...
My first concert ever was at Long Beach Arena to see Elvis.
Long Beach Arena?
Yeah, and my mom had a tape recorder in her purse, so she bootlegged the show and got a great recording. I have it on my computer now, and it's I remember it. It was probably 1976 or something. So pretty cool first show. My next show was Kiss for the Kiss Alive 2 with Cheap Trick opening.
Wasn't that one when they had like a bunch of bands like Nugent and Bob Seger? Because I remember they played in like 76, and it was Kiss, and there was like Cheap Trick, Nugent, Bob Seger. I think one other band that opened. Was that the one, or was it just Cheap Trick that opened?
No, just Cheap Trick at the Forum. And I didn't know who Cheap Trick was then. It was, I think, In Color was out. Cause I remember them doing, Hello there opening, and I really was kind of blown away by Cheap Trick. And then after that, I think was like Thin Lizzy opening for Journey at Long Beach Arena with Gary
tour. Yeah, that was the Evolution tour, and that was with Gary Moore.
Yeah, and I totally remember that too. I remember what he looked like and everything. He had on leopard skin. Yeah, like spandex on, but he just was so amazing. I mean, so ferocious.
I think that was the show. After that show, it was either that show or the San Francisco show where Phil and Gary had their infamous fist fight, which ended the tour.
Right.
That's why they would always come around and they would always fuck up their U.S. tours. Brian Robertson broke his hand or whatever during the tour, and they would only play a few dates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's amazing, isn't it?
Do you remember the UFO UFO show?
No Place
with
to Run
opening
tour.
Iron Maiden.
Oh, that was the second time. Well, we saw them at the No Place to Run tour too, right?
Yeah,
Long Beach. That was great. And then the second time they came around, the Wild and Willing and Innocent, that was UFO opening. I mean, Iron Maiden opening.
That was their tour, that was their first. Was that Killers or was that the first album?
No, it was Killers. You were at that show, right, Patrick?
Yeah, I was in 6th row for that too, and Larry Swall was in 6th row. We mentioned him earlier, right. And he was a really good photographer, and he took tons of pictures of both bands, and I have hard copies of all of them still. Just great pictures of those shows, and that was like mind blowing to see Maiden at that stage.
Oh man, yeah.
Show. And that was kind of when the new guard started coming in. You're realizing, shit, these. They blew away UFO.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Motorhead opened for Ozzy not long after. And I think, Saxon came, of course, and Girls' School came. And that was just this new breed of metal coming in. It was just so cool and so exciting. But it was pretty amazing that, these bands, it's like the opening, because usually they would have shitty opening bands. Like we said, John Cougar. You remember the first UFO show was some band Sue Sad in the next. And just
Sad in the next. I remember that too. Yeah,
new wave kind of bands or whatever, and then all of a sudden, Iron Maiden's opening for UFO and Motorhead opening for Ozzy, and it was like, fuck, this is awesome.
I remember Motorhead got booed too. I mean, that's the only reason I went, but people hated them in Long Beach.
We were in risers, either risers or the load for that, and the sound. They were so fucking loud. And the sound was just bouncing off everywhere, and I was really pissed because I was so into Motorhead, and that was actually that was Iron Fist, right? When Iron Fist just came out, 80, 81, or was it after Ace of Spades? That was Ace of Spades, yeah, because Iron Fist.
I think it was Ace of Spades,
yeah. With Crocus, that's right. And that was when Brian Robertson was actually guitar. So it was Ace of Spades.
I have the newspaper clipping right here for the Motorhead, Crocus, and Fist. Tickets were $9.50. Isn't that crazy?
That was a great show.
I found another newspaper clipping, and I don't remember this show, but at Perkins Palace with Saxon and special guest Riot.
That never happened. That was during the time. You remember they always had immigration problems? You know, people talk about immigration problems now, but they had a lot of big touring bands. I mean, even the Rolling Stones back in the 60s and 70s, they would have to go back to England due to immigration issues. They didn't get their paperwork situated. And that happened a lot, and that apparently happened to Saxon. Because I remember the next day it said, you know, due to immigration problems, Saxon had to cancel. And then they tried doing it with just Riot, and I guess it didn't sell enough tickets, so they ended up canceling the show.
The picture here has the Pete Gill lineup, so it was the classic Saxon lineup, too, so that would have been amazing.
Oh, so that would have been before they played the Whiskey.
Is that right?
No, that can't be right, because Nigel Glockler was out there. They probably either just had an old picture of him on there, but it was definitely after the Whiskey.
And Perkins Palace was the Whiskey, too, so that would have been after.
Was that where we saw Metallica? Was that the Whiskey, or was that Perkins Palace?
No, that was the Whiskey when we saw Metallica open for Saxon. And of course, Patrick took some great pictures from that show.
Who was singing? I remember, was Dave Mustaine singing that night?
No, he was doing all the James between songs, but James didn't have a guitar. He was just singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't think he was singing. I don't know, because I remember it didn't sound like the right lineup. I thought it was a more high-pitched singing. Like he was young. I guess he was 19 or 20.
That's how James sang back then.
Yeah. And they so loved Sean Harris. That's what they were trying to get him to sing like Sean Harris. And then I remember James, this is a funny thing. I remember James started smoke to try to get his voice to change because his voice wasn't deep then. And he wasn't a smoker, but he started smoking just to get his voice to change. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I guess it helps.
You remember that, Bob?
I never heard that story, but I could see that.
It's funny that just popped in my head right now because I remember asking those guys, when did James start smoking? And then Lars told me, his voice is so high. We're trying to get this voice to get some grit and to be deeper.
I could just see that at a band meeting. Lars is like, dude, James, you're going to have to
they hand him a pack of Marlboros.
You got to deepen your voice, dude. Here's a pack of Camel.
That's right.
Well, we saw Judas Priest a couple of times.
Oh yeah, the British Steel tour. We could go into that. You want to lead into that, Mike?
I remember going to that show, and that was at the Long Beach Arena, right?
Judas Priest British Steel tour.
Yeah, that was at Long Beach Arena, and I just remember him coming out on the Harley with a wall of marshals, and I'd never seen anything like that. It was just it was just all this cartoonish and looking back, but it was so awesome at the time. It was like, oh. And then he did this. They had the same exact stage setup he did the same thing with the motorcycle the second time, and I was like, I was a little disappointed, but they still killed it. I mean, it was really good.
Yeah. Well, the second time on the Port of Entry tour, he came back and I remember he was wearing denim, and everyone was all bummed. Yeah. Oh, he's not wearing the leather, but the British Steel tour, that was one of my favorite concerts. I mean, they did the whole Unleashed in the East album, Genocide Live and Victim of Changes, and fucking Halford just nailed it vocally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And Patrick, we were just talking about the last podcast Patrick was on. You actually saw him at the Santa Monica Civic the year before.
I did.
Yeah.
Good, and
was that the stained class tour?
The newspaper. No, it would have been, I think it was Unleashed. I think it was right around when Unleashed.
That was the album that got me into him because that was just so unbelievably raw.
That was the heaviest album at that time. When Unleashed came out, that was the heaviest record of all time at that time. That was what extreme metal was back then. I mean, the live version of Tyrant, Genocide, Victim of Changes, Exciter.
And I think that guitar tone on that album, not their studio albums, but on that album, is a huge influence on the whole even on the Metallica sound. And I've never heard it mentioned, but I listened to that tone, and it sounds so similar, considering the time of what became the thrash metal tone.
Who produced that album? Do you know? Because the Stained Class album, I think you said a jazz producer did it.
It was Dennis McKay. Well, that was the thing. It's funny because I just did a podcast with Martin Popoff, and he's one of these guys that hates live albums. I'm going, dude, you're fucking crazy. Live albums from the 70s, that was what the band's real sound was. Because back in the 70s, and you know what? For Stained Class, it works because it's a real progressive kind of sound with Les Binks's drums, because he got some amazing drum sound, but the guitars are just way low. You know, they're not.
Well, they're low and they're kind of nasally. I just don't think they have any. I don't think they have. Certainly don't have the balls that they did on Unleashed in the East.
Well, that's the thing. The live albums back then, you could go to Unleashed in the East. You could do Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy, UFO, Strangers in the Night. I mean, Humble Pie Performance, all the AC/DC, If You Want Blood. All those live albums, that was the sound of the band. You know, it wasn't a process sound, because back then it was all about getting on radio. And to get on radio, you need that kind of clean sound. It wasn't until like when Priest started doing like British Steel, which was a complete, I think British Steel, production-wise, changed the spectrum. I mean, that was just before, I believe, you know, Back in Black and all the Def Leppard over process production. It was just a big arena sound.
When they put that stuff out on the radio, was that pre-compression on the for radio, and that's why they had to produce it like that?
Probably, it could be. I'm not sure.
I have the newspaper clipping for that Santa Monica Civic show right in my hand here, and Point Blank opened for him.
Oh yeah, Southern rock band. I remember that.
Another one I have here, Savoy Brown opened for him.
Yeah, that was the one we saw, the British Steel tour. Savoy Brown, yeah. Who actually turned into, a couple of the guys went into a Foghat.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You know, I ran into Roger Earl at a Blue Jeans store in Huntington Beach one time. The drummer of, was he the drummer of Foghat?
Drummer of Foghat with the big mustache, yeah.
He drove up in a limo, and I recognized him because he had that big mustache.
Right.
And I talked to him for quite a while. He was a cool guy, but I think he was surprised anybody knew who he was.
Speaking of live albums, Foghat Live, one of the best fucking live albums. That album.
I love that album, too. I haven't listened to it in years, but maybe I'll have to dig that out. That was a great album. Honey Hush.
Yeah, Honey Hush. I mean, so many of those songs. And even the live version of, I Just Want to Make Love to You and Slow Ride. I just love that intro.
This is Screaming for Vengeance, but it has Coney Hatch open for him.
That's right, yeah. It was kind of cool to think of all the opening bands. I remember the AC/DC show we went to, Prism opened. Remember that Canadian band, Prism?
Yep, I do, yeah.
Whole surgery. What was it? Open Heart Surgery. And what was the other? I'm a Spaceship Superstar. It was like they had like kind of a hit for a minute, and then they just kind of disappeared.
Funny you say that, because of that show, the thing I remember the most of the whole show was a song called Armageddon that Prism did. And it was so catchy. I can still sing the song from that long ago. It was such a catchy song. I mean, I never listened to them other than seeing them that day. And I still remember that song.
That was literally the first concert I ever saw. I was 15 years old. And I saw Prism, and I thought, wow, these guys are the greatest thing ever. And then, of course, AC/DC came on. It was like, who the fuck is Prism? I mean, when AC/DC came on, it was like, you didn't even care.
I remember leaving that show, too, that AC/DC show, that I've never seen this since then or before, but people walking out were as excited as they were during the show. Like, people were so blown away and pumped up that people were going nuts. Wow. Yeah.
That was what was so cool about the Long Beach Arena. That show and the pre-show we were talking about. I remember walking down. You remember that stairway that went down? Everyone would walk down the stairs after. And it was so fucking loud. Everyone just started cheering and yelling. And it was deafening loud because it was just all echo. That's how excited people were. And you're right about that AC/DC show. People were, walking out for hours going, fuck, this kicked ass. This was awesome.
It doesn't happen. It hasn't. I don't remember it happening at any other shows.
Well, dude, it's funny because I was just talking about this to someone. You know that band Rammstein, right? Have you ever seen Rammstein before?
I've never seen them, no.
You know the German band Rammstein, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Best live band. Even if you're not into their music, you see them live, fucking unbelievable. I remember seeing them, I saw them a few times, but last time I saw them was when they played the Pond in Orange County. Go down there alone. I meet this guy there from Germany, and he and I are just getting totally into it. Everyone else has their cameras out, and it was kind of a millennial crowd, whatever, except this guy from Germany and me just totally getting into it, and people are like looking at us, and then I remember we're walking out, we're like, fuck yeah, it was awesome. And people are looking at us like laughing. Like, who are these old guys? Look at this guy. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You just got your ass kicked out of concert. Are you really that jaded?
That's what your dad said and his dad said.
But it was the opposite. They were going, these young kids are crazy. Now the young kids are going, these old guys are crazy.
We're the last great generation, right?
That's right.
The things I went to a lot was because of my mom, but she took me to see so many mind-blowing jazz concerts that I didn't appreciate at that point, but people like, Dizzy Gillespie and Sarah Vaughan and Oscar Peterson, and those were really my first concerts because she took us to those, from the very beginning. And I'm so thankful that I saw those people because, there won't be anybody ever like them again. But those were my first shows, and trying to think of other I think most of the shows were a little bit later. It went to the big shows, but like a lot of the small shows, like seeing Y&T in clubs and things like that. Those are the kind of the shows I really remember, yeah.
Hey, Pat, did you ever go to those festivals? Did you go to the Cal Jam 2 or the California Music Festival with Aerosmith and Newton?
No, I remember seeing them on TV, but that's all. I didn't go to any of them.
Yeah, neither did I. But I remember Larry Swall and all those guys. They went to the Cal Jam, and that was like 7th, 8th grade. I remember watching them on TV as well. And Mahogany Rush, Frank Marino.
I would have loved to seen him back then. Didn't Rubicon, didn't they play that too?
Rubicon, UFO, which was one of the last shows with Schenker, I think. And I think Hetty's, what was it? The Boomtown Rats opened and they got booed off stage.
Wow, that's a weird bill.
Other shows were great shows back then were those Rush shows in the late 70s.
See, I never saw Rush until the 90s, I think.
Oh, yeah, we saw them a couple times. I took pictures of those. I have some pretty cool, too.
Late 70s? Because I know they used to play the Starwood, and then where did they play, like the Civic? Because they weren't really too big until Spirit of the Radio kind of kicked, which was 1980?
Yeah, I know the shows were at Long Beach Arena. Maybe they were 1980, yeah.
When did you start seeing local bands, Bob?
The Whiskey was one of the first when we saw. Well, we saw. Pat and I saw Metallica before at the Radio City, which was their first show, and then we saw shows at the Woodstock. But the first time I went into Hollywood to see a concert, I think, was that Whiskey show.
Yeah, no, I meant in Orange County. So Woodstock
saw in Orange County was a la carte at the Golden Bear, and that was 1980.
Right, that was a great venue.
Yeah, that was killer. I think I went with Rich Guru, actually.
Well, that's when a band came into town and played the Golden Bear, that if we had any interest, because all I remember was like Tower of Power and some of those bands.
Yeah, they played. But, dude, I saw Rory Gallagher there. I saw Robin Trower there. I saw Randy Hansen there. Randy Hansen was my favorite.
I remember.
Tribute. He was fucking awesome. And he would go out in the middle of PCH. Do you remember that, Patrick? You ever see him there? He would just... Yeah, he was insane.
How was Robin Trower?
Trower were fucking great there. I think we saw them. That was probably like 84.
Oh.
So it was. I think it was still the original singer. What's his name?
Even the one from Bridge of Sighs?
Yeah.
I forgot.
James Dewar. Yeah. James Dewar.
Yeah, the earliest shows I saw there, I went to some shows, jazz things there, but I saw Yngwie and Alcatraz and then the Y&T show. Those are the earliest ones I remember seeing there.
At the Golden Bear?
Yeah.
I don't remember Alcatraz playing the Golden Bear. Wow.
Yeah, it was with Yngwie, too. I remember it very clearly. And then also saw him with Steeler at the Country Club with Yngwie.
Yeah, I was there with you, and we saw him at Radio City with Yngwie, too. Well, at Steeler. Right. You didn't go to too many club shows, Mike, did you?
And I started going to club shows, but I kind of went punk after a lot of that stuff. Yeah, because when I
us, dude.
I still secretly listening to my metal, but But the cool thing about a punk show is, it's $6 and you see 6 bands and you can jump on stage and, be part of the action. I just remember feeling at the last Judas Priest show that when he did when he came out on the Harley and I was way back there, I just feel like I couldn't participate. I just, kept my hands folded on my lap. And when you go to a punk show, you can get really involved. I mean, the musicianship obviously wasn't good, and I never really, that wasn't what it was about,
Right.
Did you go to, Patrick and I were just talking about the old Cuckoo's Nest. Did you ever go to any of those shows, Mike? Or you were a little bit too young for that, right?
Yeah, I think they closed down. That was in Costa Mesa. They closed down. I think there was the TSOL and other punk bands and the Vandals played there. And by the time I could start going to the punk shows and was going out there, I think they closed down. But I remember there was punk bands playing at Radio City, and and the other ones were always at in Long Beach at the Fenders Ballroom. And some of the good metal-ish bands, like metal-ish punk, like Bad Brains. Dr. No is just a ripper.
I saw that.
So bands like that were really, really kind of like you can get your metal on and still be a punker,
Yeah, well, the Cuckoo's Nest became the Concert Factory, and that was where Patrick and I used to hang out. And then Radio City was Jerry Roach, who used to run the Cuckoo's Nest. So he started doing a lot of kind of punk stuff and then got more into metal. But I remember there were times when they would have, like Black Flag play at the Radio City and have a metal show at Woodstock, and it would just be fucking mayhem.
Yeah, they all shared the same parking lot, right?
Yeah, it was all the same parking lot. And it was kind of the same, like Patrick and I talked about. Of course, the infamous story was Zuby's and the old Cuckoo's Nest. They had a fucking redneck country bar right next to a punk bar, and just fights ensued. And it was almost like they wanted it to happen. Like the cops set it up for that, just crazy fights. And even into the Concert Factory, I told Patrick on the last podcast that time I got my ass kicked by some chick. And no, I'm not going to get into it again.
You're going to take that out of this podcast, right?
No, I'll put it in. I'm not embarrassed. Fuck it.
Hey, Bob, do you remember going to Accept at the Concert Factory?
Yeah, they did 2 songs,
yeah.
Right? The funny thing is I ended up living with York Fisher, the guitar player.
I remember that.
And I asked him, I go, what happened that show? Leatherwolf opened. They did their whole set, and they overpacked the place. And the cops came in, and that was during the time when they, were real strict about, the fire code.
Yeah.
And he told me that it was just the worst night. He said they all had to leave. They were all like in their robes because they just got off stage and they were all sweating. And then their car broke down on the freeway. They had a flat tire and they're all in their robes trying to jack up a tire. Imagine this German band just came over and they're playing this place in fucking Orange County. And they're on the 55 freeway with a broken down car and a flat tire in robes and trying to replace their tire. He just said it was just a disaster that whole night.
I remember it turned into a riot, too. Do you remember that? Like bottles were being thrown at the stage, and it was crazy.
Yeah. People were passionate then. I remember going to I don't know if you remember the street scene, when they had the street scene in L.A.,
Yeah, they still do.
Downtown LA. They do it in San Diego now, I think. I don't know if they're still doing it. But back they stopped it. I think the last year was like 85 or 86. The Ramones were supposed to play and they canceled. And a bunch of bands, I think Guns N' Roses when they kind of first started out, and Poison and all these different bands. There were like 10 different stages downtown. And then like the Ramones canceled and there was beer bottles flying everywhere. And then the police on horses, they're just cracking skulls. I mean, it was like watching those old 60s riots with people walking around with bloody heads. And my buddy's like, grabs you, let's get the fuck out of here, And it was insane, dude. There was some crazy shit back then.
I remember I wrote Blackmore like a dozen times, and I found out much later he was not too appreciative of his fans and would never write anyone back. And Dio was always the one that was super ingratiated to his fans. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely worship. I mean, when I started playing guitar, Dave Murray, and Bill Nelson from Bebop Deluxe were my 3 favorite guitar players.
Oh, dude, that's right. You were a big Bill Nelson guy. Because your older brother, Andy, he was like the big prog guy, I remember. We would kind of go through his record collection when he wasn't home. You and I would go through, and I think that was the first time I saw when like Sad Wings first came out, and he had a Budgie record, because they were kind of considered prog then. But I remember Andy was deep into all that, Genesis, Yes, and Nectar and all those, off the wall, Camel,
Wishbone Ash,
and what was the other band? Crack the Sky, and all these off the wall, and Bebop Deluxe, obviously, and that Futurama album I thought was awesome.
Oh man, his playing on that is unbelievable.
I've seen John Sykes list him as one of his heroes.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, him and of course Gary Moore, but he says that was his first hero was Bill Nelson. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. He's such an unsung player. I mean, it's so, and I think it was because he's either trying to come off a little glammy and biting Mick Ronson, or just that he just didn't get the respect that he should have gotten. But he still plays in England and he still does experimental music, but his guitar playing is just unbelievable.
Absolutely. As a 3-piece band, I mean, that whole band was brilliant. That drummer was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, talking about Wishbone Ash, I remember, seeing old ads and stuff like Bebop Deluxe and Wishbone Ash at like Long Beach Arena. And, prog rock, people forget about how big that was in the mid to late.
Oh, that's all there was is, I mean, can you imagine something like Yes being big today? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I was thinking about when you guys were talking about punk rock, there was couple guys in high school. One of the guys is one of my best friends. Name was Bobby Lyons, and he was really into punk rock. and then there was another guy named Billy Warman, but he went by Billy Putty. And he was the only guy at Ocean View that looked like a punk rocker. I mean, he totally looked like a British punk rocker, but he'd get beat up all the time by football players. And then by the time we're seniors, the football players were all into punk.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yep. It took balls for someone to go punk in the early days. You know, the one guy just comes in with his hair all spiked and died or whatever it is, and everyone just beat the shit out of him. Brutal. But that took or wearing a Black Flag shirt.
A lot of the big punk dudes, like you remember Dave Abbott, right? Tank Abbott. He was an old Huntington Beach guy, and he kind of became a punk for a while. He was at a lot of the punk rock parties, and his whole thing was beat up on hippies. You kind of had that vibe going on too for a while. A lot of the old Huntington Beach parties. For those that don't know, Tank Abbott was a big MMA fighter. He went to Marina. I think he was a year younger than me, but I definitely remember him from back in those days because all my buddies were punks, and I would go to some of their parties, and it was pretty crazy back then for sure.
I remember Steve Hallis and DEF CON. They worked out at the same gym, and he knew him and would talk about him. And he kind of messed with guys in the gym, too.
When the UFC first started, you remember it was underground? It was just like in Colorado. It was super small, and half the people was like, dude, I know this guy. I went to school with this guy. I mean, literally half the people were from Huntington Beach.
Yeah, I remember there being really bad fights, like bloody fights.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that used to do security at like Hurricanes and some of those places in Huntington. And he just said there were fights every night. I mean, all the security guys were huge bodybuilders, and still they couldn't even handle, just fucking crazy fight. We saw a lot of crazy shit, especially in downtown Huntington.
Yeah, Huntington definitely had a dark side for sure. Even though they've cleaned it up a lot, it still seems like there's just a violence or something. And whether punk or there was the rockabilly scene that was really big, and a lot of those guys were big fighters, and that was around the same time.
I remember a club called Billy Barty's.
Yeah, Metallica played there, Motorhead played there, Armored Saint played there. That was actually the actor Billy Barty. I guess you can't say midget these days. Small person. And he would be out there a lot.
He would be. I'd see him because I'd go to punk rock shows there, and I'd see him there. Yeah.
And it was a giant roller skating rink.
I remember the stage was like really, really high off the ground. The stage was.
Totally, I remember that.
Yeah.
You saw Metallica there, right? I missed that show.
I didn't see that show. Yeah,
was that in Anaheim?
Yeah, it was in Anaheim.
Yeah, I remember that show. I saw the Dickies there.
I saw the Dickies there too.
Probably at the same show.
Mike, you remember the old golf course? Well, I think the golf course is still there in Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
They had the old clubhouse, which was just a beat to shit clubhouse. They used to do shows there.
Yeah, I remember that. Though I think that was short lived, though, wasn't it? Not even a year.
I remember with my buddies, we saw the Vandals, who I thought were a fun band, and we saw the Dickies and a couple other bands there, actually.
Yeah, those guys were all good bands. I mean, they were kind of novelty, but they were all good musicians.
See, that was the shit I liked. I liked kind of the fun punk, that were, decent musicians.
Did we see August Red Moon, or did they changed their name to, what was it, Eden?
Eden, yeah. But you and I went to them too, right? Did you go to the Woodstock or any of the old shows, Mike?
Yeah, I remember seeing them once or twice. Yeah. I remember thinking that red vinyl, the August Red Moon red vinyl was so cool.
Yeah, I remember seeing them too.
Yeah, it's fun catching up on all this stuff, going down memory lane, all that.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. You can subscribe and listen to all episodes of the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Google Play, and more. Be on the lookout real soon for our new website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Go to our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for up-to-date news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Email all questions, comments, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.